Fighter. Fight! Go!
Welcome back to Soul Fighter. This time we're playing as Orion, who is the main character if the manual is to be believed, so that's something. Unlike the other two, Orion is not fast or strong. His single redeeming quality as a fighter is that staff on his back. However, the staff does drain our weapon meter just as any other weapon would. It does fire projectiles, so that's something special. That's what makes Orion worthwhile as a character, is that he can shoot projectiles without having to go into first-person mode. As far as melee combat, he attacks very slowly, his fists are incredibly weak, but at least he can still do that dashing kick spam that Xiaomi can. It may be even better than Xiaomi's, so he has that going for him. I wanted to go so far as to say Orion necessitates the dashing kick spam, but it may be possible to beat the game with him without using that. Just unreasonably difficult. So yeah, here's a new enemy type we haven't even talked about yet, the Mutabusk. Mutabusk. They're bug-type enemies that are very similar to the Kalos we fought earlier. The difference being that they can shoot acid at us and they're way more aggressive. When you're fighting them one-on-one, it's not such a big deal because their attacks don't hit that hard. But if you're fighting a group of them, then you're likely to get repeatedly knocked to the ground, and it's not very fun. Hey there. These skeleton enemies are called shingles, because that's hilarious or something. They're not very strong, but they are very good at defending. They're basically just roadblocks. Let's talk more about the Mutabusk. The bugs. They can be difficult to knock out of the air unless you're using projectiles or playing as Altus, because Altus's dashing kick aims upward instead of downward. You can also knock them out of the air if they're just hovering in a circle around you by smashing the punch button. Only if you're facing them, though. And they're likely to dive bomb you at the exact moment you try to punch them. Whenever there's a group of them, I just like to pull out Orion's staff to deal with them, because trying to combat them otherwise is a huge pain. Not really with Altus, but with Orion or Xiaomi, yeah, they can be rather difficult. So there are a few gimmicks in this desert area. One of them is that there are giant mouths that will pop out of the sand and try to eat us. They don't deal very much damage, but they do knock us over. It's good that they don't deal very much damage, though, because there's no indication of where they are. They're always in the same place every time you play this level, so it's possible to memorize their locations. But if you're just playing through for the first time, you're not going to know where they are, because they're entirely invisible. There is another gimmick in the desert, and it's that there are snakes hiding in the sand that will eat us. Do not confuse the snakes with the mouths that I just talked about. They're entirely different. The snakes only appear if we stand in one spot for a prolonged period of time. And I don't know how much damage they do because I've never been bitten by them. I tried to do a run where I didn't get hit by the sand mouths at all, but I believe I get hit once because I'm fighting an enemy on top of one. These fellows with the pugil sticks are called the Ramus, and they are the bane of my existence, and if you're playing this, they'll be the bane of your existence too. They are very, very good at blocking, and they interrupt your combos way better than any of the other enemies you've fought so far. Using your fists on them is not advised in any situation, unless you're hitting them from behind. I recommend only using your kicks on them and trying to knock them over before you do so. So that way they don't have time to deflect your blows. Because oh boy will they deflect your blows. The manual says it recommends using combo attacks on them. I think whoever wrote that must hate people, because that is the worst idea. Only use a combo if you're using the special combo that requires your POW meter. Otherwise just knock them over and only use your kicks on them. Or Orion's staff if you have that handy. So the way Orion's staff works is if we dash and press attack, then he shoots a single big fireball. But if we stand still and press attack, he shoots 3 smaller fireballs and then a big fireball. The dashing attack is obviously way more useful. The downside to that, though, is that obviously if you're dashing towards your enemy, then the projectile function of the staff is going to be somewhat limited. So so just standing back and spamming the attack button works fine if you want to waste your weapon energy. Using Orion's staff at close range is a horrible idea, but that doesn't mean you won't see me do it plenty. Because as terrible as it is in close quarters combat, it's still way better than his fists are. I again want to compliment the variety of locations and the atmosphere this game presents. Alright, now let's get back to kicking bugs. And while we're at it, let's talk a little more about Soul Fighter as a product and not as a video game. Oh hey, that was the sand mouse just there that I got hit by. But anyway, I said Soul Fighter was planned to be released in arcades, but that never happened. But it was also planned to be released on the GameCube and PS2 at some point. Neither of those happened either, but the GameCube release got really close, to the point that they had box art ready for it, and it had an official release date in 2003. That's 4 years after its release on the Dreamcast. Now, Soul Fighter was not very well received on the Dreamcast when it was planned to be a launch title. It wasn't a launch title because they had setbacks, but keep in mind, it was not well received when it came out originally. So if it came out in 2003 unchanged like this, I can't imagine it would have been better received. But I still think it's really terrible that the port was never made successfully, because good or bad exposure is still exposure. And if this game came out on the PS2 or GameCube, well, it probably would have had at least one full playthrough on the internet. But as it stands, the game is somehow more forgotten than Hidden Invasion, a game which, let's just say it's nowhere near as quality as Soul Fighter. It came out after Soul Fighter and shared many of Soul Fighter's mechanics, but it was much worse in almost every imaginable fashion. And somehow even that game got some exposure. But hey, maybe years and years and years from now, someone will finally care about this video game and they'll look it up on YouTube and they'll find my Let's Play. Years from now. Because the internet has had plenty of time to care about Soul Fighter and they still haven't yet. You gotta hold on to hope. So that was the Shingles' most powerful combo. And you might notice it still didn't hurt that much. There are two things you need to know about this level. One, it's really complex and labyrinthine, and two, it's nearly impossible to get lost. Oh, and three, it's really hard. The most difficult thing about it is the abundance of Ramus, these enemies right here with the pugil sticks. Because as I said, they just love to interrupt your combo. And if we didn't know the dashing kick spamming exploit, it would be way harder to complete this. To the point that you would probably give up. Ow. Hopefully you saw just there what I meant about them interrupting our combos. Oh, that was a mechanic I meant to show off. We can throw enemies. Now in most beat-em-ups, throwing enemies is a good way to get them from one side of your body to the other. Usually so you can do crowd control better. But in this game it's not that simple, because throwing enemies is very time-consuming. You grab and throw enemies the same way you grab items, which means you press the A button and down at the same time. And this is fine for items because items are stationary, but enemies are always moving, so pressing down and A might mean you accidentally reorient yourself and can't grab the enemy anymore. You can only grab them when you see the green circle around them, but that doesn't necessarily mean you'll do it successfully anyway, because it takes a while to actually touch them, and they're likely to have started a combo on you by then. In short, I have yet to find a practical use for throws. Maybe I will before this Let's Play is over, but somehow I doubt it. So the way this maze or dungeon or prison, whatever you want to call it, works is that we defeat a group of enemies, and then it opens an area further into the dungeon. And then we defeat another group of enemies, and it opens yet another area further into the dungeon. Until we open up enough doors to escape. Now, for the most part, you can probably handle this as any character. But there are a couple fights, I think just a couple, that anybody playing this game would struggle with, regardless of how good they are. The game also pulls something that not a lot of stages do, where it spawns enemies back in places you've already been. Presumably so that way you have something to do while you backtrack. This is a blessing and a curse, because it does give you the opportunity to pick up more items from fallen enemies. But it also gives you more opportunity to get your ass kicked. So before Let's Playing this game, I tried to look up as many professional reviews as possible, because I wanted as much insight as I could possibly get onto the game and its development. And I have to wonder whether the reviewers received an entirely different copy of the game than me, or reviewers in 1999 were just that hardcore. Because all of them were like, yeah, this sucks, it doesn't have a co-op mode, which is a dumb criticism, but anyway, all of them were like, yeah, this sucks. And they all implied, at least, that they beat it, but they made it sound piss easy. And that just baffled me, because some of the other criticisms they mentioned made it sound like they would have trouble completing the game. They said the camera made it difficult to walk in the proper directions, and that it was difficult to properly pick up items because of the awkward button mapping and the controls. But if you're having so much issue with the basic functions of the game, how did you complete it so easily? Because holy shit, is this not an easy game. But by far the takeaway criticism is that it is apparently a heinous crime, and I'm taking that from one of the reviews directly. It is heinous that this game does not have a co-op mode, and that is unacceptable for a, quote, Golden Axe clone. So yeah, that's the reviews we were dealing with at the time. Alright, rant over, back to the actual game. We can see in this area that there are actual human hostages being held in these cells, but we can't do anything to rescue them, presumably because we don't have the key, and for some reason Altus can't punch through iron bars. After we defeat all the enemies in this room, a doorway opens, allowing us further into the dungeon. But we also have to backtrack a bit and defeat enemies in areas that we've already been to. Not too many, but just a couple. So we're gonna skip past the backtracking if that's alright. I think after this last soul you'll hear the rumbling of the gates opening. Yep, alright. So further into the dungeon, we come across a new enemy type, the Cloticus. That's what it's called. The Cloticus can be mistaken for a very easy opponent, because it doesn't deal very much damage. But the high point of the Cloticus's combat abilities is how fast it moves, and how well it attacks in numbers. They tend to bob around like professional boxers, and unless you can get them on the ground, they're a real hassle to deal with. Fortunately, as we learned, we can spam our dashing kick to get them on the ground and have them stay there. Alright, now up next, this battle is hell. It's 3 Ramuses. 3 of them. It is hell. We brought the staff with us for a reason, because I don't want to give them the chance to get off the ground. The sliding kick strategy is dangerous here because there's a 4th Ramus just behind these 3, and you can accidentally lead your attack right into them, and whoops, you're fighting a 4th one now. We're getting smacked around a lot because we're a slow old bastard, but that's actually a good thing. It's better that they use these short combos that knock us down than the longer ones, because that's where the real damage comes from. And you know the game you're playing is difficult when you say, "Thank God, some cheese," out loud. With only 2, it's a much less oppressive and scary fight, but you still need to be careful. They tend to block, oh shit. They tend to block our magic bolts, which I'm not sure how they do that with those pugil sticks, but that's a thing they can do. The easiest way to get around them blocking our bolts is to shoot them from further away, but that's easier said than done considering how fast they are and how slow we are. Later in the game, the difficulties of fighting a Ramus will not be contained to just a single enemy type, and that's when you need to get good. For now, we can afford to just barely scrape by like this because fights like these are an oddity, they're a rarity. But later in the game, they're the norm. And now we can have some catharsis by kicking the shit out of this Ramus that was just napping while we beat up all his buddies. And past a few more winding corridors and some skeletons, here is the second difficult fight of the level. This room just contains a huge pillar in the center, and it's surrounded by Claudicuses. The difficulty here, if you're playing normally, is just that they move so fast, and they circle around you in such a way that it's difficult to get out of their little ring of death. I wish I could pretend I did that on purpose, but no, I was just trying to pick up that ring. Anyway, the difficulty if you're fighting these guys normally is in the fact that they move so fast and they circle around you really well. But we're not really playing normally with Orion, we're abusing the sliding kick as much as physically possible. So instead of getting batted around like a really old, hairy baseball, we're just kicking them with our shin until they're separate enough for us to take them out. Now, if you're tired of seeing me dashing kick enemies to death, don't worry, because after Orion we're going to go back to playing as Altus, and Altus cannot do the dashing kick spam. He is physically incapable of it. And this is because, as I said, his dashing kick goes in the air instead of toward the ground or even the midsection of the enemies. I mean, I guess it does hit the midsection, but it's still more upward than everyone else's, is what I'm getting at. So we're almost out of the dungeon, but you may notice we still have nearly 20 enemies left, so what's up with that? Well, this level is basically 2 levels in one. Let's go with that. After we hear the gates open, we turn around, and... we'll see light in a second. There's not light right now because of the draw distance. And we see... almost... It's still pitch black. And we see... you know what? Let's just... We see the way out. The way out. There's the light. So we come out into the light, and we find more desert outside the dungeon. But there's also a ton of traps. Like a fuck ton. Now, thankfully, just like the sand mouths, these traps don't really hurt us very much. You can see that did almost no damage. They're basically just for flavor in the environment. The enemies can also be hit with them, but the traps don't deal very much damage to the enemies either. I feel like perhaps the developer played a lot of beat-em-ups in their spare time, and they realized the frustration of running into a trap that you can't easily avoid, and losing all your health no matter how good you are at the combat. Speaking of the developer, this game actually had 2 developers, which I was not aware of at first. The primary developer appeared to be Toka, who is a developer that was obsessed with arcade games, and all their games basically centered around the design visions of 2 people. 2 very passionate people. In spite of this, most of their games were not very good, and they were not very well received either. But I recently found out that there was a second developer involved in the making of Soul Fighter. A very young startup company called Piggyback Interactive. And this was the only game they co-developed. The only one. They didn't touch game development after that, and not very much is known about their involvement with Soul Fighter. So I don't know whether to thank them for turning Soul Fighter into a much more polished game than Toka's other titles, or just to acknowledge their existence and nothing more. I can tell you, however, that Piggyback Interactive is still around. They just don't make video games. Instead, they make strategy guides. Apparently the best strategy guides ever. Like, no contest. They often make them with the support of the developer of the game, and that way they can put official strategy guide on all of their strategy guides instead of unofficial. And any effort to contact them for comment on Soul Fighter has met with nothing. But hey, who knows? The rest of this level is kind of a breather, a cakewalk compared to what you went through inside the dungeon. Outside of the dungeon is cut into 4 separate areas in this big circle, and each one is themed around a certain enemy or a couple enemies. For example, the next one we're about to go into has a ton of bug enemies in it. And again, it bears stating that the bug enemies are difficult in a group, so you either want to use projectile weapons or Altus's high kick in order to get them out of the air, because chasing them around like an idiot doesn't work, as you just saw. But yeah, if you made it this far, you should have no issue with this section, so I'm gonna skip to the end of the level. As you can see by the bottom left, there are only 13 enemies in this stage, which probably means it ends in a boss fight, which follows with the trend set by the last boss fight, where we only fought 7 enemies. I wish I could say this trend stayed throughout the rest of the game. But oh boy, does it not. Anyway, we just have to head down to that Coliseum we saw in the cutscene and then initiate a boss battle with, I'm sure you can guess what. There aren't exactly a ton of treasure chests on the way down there, but you fight the enemies in very small quantities, so you shouldn't have any trouble getting down there regardless. Like I said, if you got here, then you should have no issue whatsoever making it through. Yep, it's that Minotaur we saw in the cutscene. His most defining feature is that he charges at us and knocks us right over, just like we do to normal enemies. Unfortunately for him, he's also the slowest of the bosses, so it's even possible to go toe-to-toe with him for a moment like we just did. But the winning strategy here is to run away, listen for his running noise, and then wait for it to stop. And when it stops, he's open for attack. He also likes to block a lot, but that ironically makes him a lot easier to knock over. This is because he can only block one hit of your dashing kick, so if he blocks the first one, he can't stop the rest of the hits from knocking him over. He's actually really easy, especially in comparison to the last 2 bosses.
Victory!